to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go.
I first heard of Amelia. I don't even think I heard of you from your mother and your sister, but from that eater story I found on you when you got recognized as what was it? The award, Eater gave you that award.
It was for the 2017 Younga.
Yes, there's the logo right there. So, and she has been doing corporate dining management for how long now?
Going on 5 years.
Okay. And in that article it says, if you told me a few years ago I'd be working for corporate dining, I would never have believed you.
and I maintain that.
So, you grew up in food allergy, or not food allergy, family. Your mom, your dad, your sister's got food allergies.
Yes.
How has that inspired you, each one of them differently maybe, to do what you do now?
Sure. So they all contributed in kind of different ways. Growing up, my kind of entry into the food industry started at a very, very young age. My parents' business meant that we had chefs coming in to the house as they worked from an office attached to the house, and cooking and just kind of teaching and joining us for meals. So we were exposed to quite a few different chefs, which was really kind of at the rise of the Food Network. So people were seeing chefs in a whole new light, and of course, the celebrity chef that is now so common, it was really before that became a thing. So we didn't even know how lucky we were to be spending time with these folks. But it opened me up to a world of food that I wouldn't have been exposed to as a child otherwise. And it also meant that my responsibility, my chore, was always to set the table. And so that's kind of how I really got into the front of the house service side of things. It was something I always enjoyed, and I loved making every place setting perfect and just really creating an environment that people felt comfortable in, which then translated to when my father opened up a restaurant when I was in my teens. I started working there and learned about service, and he had a lot of untraditional hiring practices, so I learned a lot about team management and how to select your team for passion and teach skill, and I kind of grew up in that. And then after moving to New York City and deciding that this was really the world I wanted to go into, my sister discovered most of her food allergies at that time, which was obviously a long process for any of you that have been kind of involved in that. And so we really tried to learn how to navigate the dining scene, both as a guest and as a supplier, in a way that accommodated allergies. And I think because it was so close to my heart, I was able to kind of understand and adapt to that a little bit earlier than kind of how common it is now. And I think that restaurants are, now you can go in and you can get a menu and it'll say gluten-free or dairy-free on the menu, whereas before it was really challenging to get that information. And so I tried to bring that to the places that I was working.
Very cool. And there's still lots of people who have to learn about it.
Yes, that's true.
They don't get it. What has been your greatest joy in all of this as a woman in food and beverage industry?
So my greatest joy as a woman in the food and beverage industry is really working with other, I don't want to say women, I want to say women and allies in the food and beverage industry and outside of the industry as well. I think that I am very lucky in that I have a strong female presence on my team, and I work with a lot of women, and I work for a company that has a female CEO. And so having that support and understanding just changes the culture, and being able to help other women who want to grow in this industry is a huge source of joy for me. And it's really a huge honor. I mean, to be entrusted with helping somebody to grow into their own potential and to lead them hopefully in the right direction, and to see them grow into their potential is really rewarding for me.
Looking back to all those people coming into your house and those people that you met, looking at what they've done and what you've done with your career, is there anything different that you would do now from back then, or that you took away from that you're implementing now? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I think it's a hard question to answer. Obviously, everybody makes decisions in their lives that gets them to where they are today.
Yeah.
I think that one of the interesting things when you are exposed to these kind of thought leaders or revolutionaries, this may be a strong term, but people that are really the change makers, it can skew your perspective a little bit. And I think that, acknowledging that I'm really truly in a position of privilege because I've had so much exposure to these people, it is a responsibility to really pass that on to others who don't necessarily get that. So because I was exposed to so many of these incredible leaders, to be able to take their teachings and give them to folks who may not have that availability, I think is something that I really try to do actively and could have done more of earlier in my career.
What advice do you give to young people, young women coming up into the industry now?
Oh boy, it's really about confidence. I think that as women, we all struggle still with confidence in the workplace, and I think that we need to be able to acknowledge the things that we're not good at and take the initiative to go out and get better at those things. The things that I tell my team constantly, if it makes you uncomfortable, if it's the task that you're dreading, do that thing first, and ask for help and go to somebody who you know is really, really good at it, even if it is intimidating, because I think that those are the things we shy away from, and having a lack of knowledge or a lack of confidence in one particular area can start to chip away at the confidence in the things that you're really, really good at. And so being able to go out and learn that skill will help you be more well-rounded.
That's really good, because it does eat away with you. Even like now, it says, hey, people are trying to convert all of their meetings into online meetings, and they're like, I don't know how to do this, and I'm afraid to ask people. But you just have to ask, and you have to have the confidence to go forward. And if you screw up, it was 2 minutes of your time,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think to that point too, I mean, I'm putting a lot of thought right now into how I support my team, because they're working in really unconventional ways. And as a leader, as a boss, how can you support your team? Can you give them the space to say, I don't know how to do this, even if it's something that you really think they should know how to do? Is there a way to make them feel comfortable recalibrating your own expectations so that they have the freedom to say, I don't know how to do this, and then learn how to do it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, because, and we talk also about different, not genders, but different demographics of age nowadays, and people are afraid to learn from the young ones, and the old guys, young ones are afraid to learn from the old ones, but we have to, especially right now.
Mm-hmm.
And what can we do, and the fact that, like Sweet Green is now delivering free food to all hospital workers or hospitals, looking at how we can give back with what we can do. And Jose has opened up his kitchens to be basically soup kitchens to help get food out to people that need it. And the schools that are still making the food for the kids who need it, because they're not going to get their school food programs, so how can we do that? Looking back at your resume, or your history, you, graduated with NYU with a concentration in activism in the food industry and a minor in social entrepreneurship. So basically, from this week, how are you going to apply both of those things?
Oh, that's the question of the hour, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a really good question, and it's something I've been reflecting on a lot during this transition. The honest truth is that I don't know yet. I think that in a time like this, personally, I can working for a large corporation, you do have to ask yourself, what is my role in this larger structure, and how can I contribute? And, the immediate answer is that I have a large team of people that are concerned about when they're going to be able to come back to work. And it's my job to be able to not just work to get an answer to that question, but to create a more sustainable future for people of all different genders and ilks that work in the restaurant industry. I mean, when you look at a crisis like this, I think what it really reveals is how underprepared we are. And so, am I doing everything I can in my power to give each of my team members the skills to grow in their career, or am I, restricting them to the positions that they're in? If, restaurants are closing for months on end, what other options do people have, and have I helped them to learn those skills? And I think that's the piece that I'm asking myself in terms of the day-to-day. And then I think, eventually at some point I do want to be able to open my own restaurant and create an environment, ideally in a financial way, that is able to give back to the community, not just the local community from a geographic standpoint, but the farmers and the employees and all of the different stakeholders that are involved in operating a restaurant. And so thinking about untraditional financial structures for restaurant investment is something that's been on my mind lately.
That's really interesting. I mean, because, we look at how people get funding for other projects and stuff through whatever those websites are called that I can't think of at the moment. Fund, whatever they are.
GoFundMe and Kickstarter.
Yes, thank you. How can we do that? And not necessarily having to rely on food coming from all the way across the country, but then those farmers that are local, like I know one conference center is like, we want to use your eggs, they're the best eggs. He goes, but I can't give you my eggs because then I can't give them to my, the guy down the street that I have sold eggs to for the last 10 years,
right?
General consumer. So how do we manage that? And we chatted years ago because of, your sister and food allergies, and I loved what you did with your last client, as far as teaching your chefs about labeling it. If you cook it, you label it, right? And that brings me to a whole nother conversation of inclusion. Are you doing that same thing? Because I'm assuming you have a whole new set of chefs that you're working with, and staff. So how are you bringing that knowledge that you grew up with, and implementing it in? Because that's another skill set, basically, that you can help teach your team on doing. And how does that include inclusion in your current clients?
Yes, absolutely. So inclusion is the name of the game. It's the buzzword that I think is on everybody's mind, at least in the corporate dining industry right now, and especially when you look at kind of the leaders in the industry, especially the tech companies. And if you take the coronavirus crisis out of the equation and just look at regular daily operations, the work that we're doing now, I think, is really progressive and necessary. One of the clients that I'm working with now, we have a full-time registered dietitian on site who reviews every single ingredient, every single recipe, and all of the cooking methods to make sure that we are optimizing wellness. And that means that we're trying to encourage, through education of our guests, we're trying to encourage positive relationships with food, whatever that may mean. So it's not one diet specific, it's really education specific, so that each person can help create a plan that works best for them. And information, of course, is power, and so being able to provide consistent and honest information about the food that we're serving and how we're serving it, I think, is really the first step so that people can make informed decisions. I think the second step is really when we're working on such a large scale as we do in corporate dining, people are really looking to us as the experts. And so it's our job to vet the ingredients and the products that we're serving to make sure that they are of the best possible quality. And so many of the tech companies, and I'm sure you're familiar with the way Google has their micro kitchens and kind of free snacks for everybody. Many of our clients follow a similar model, and so we've worked really hard to source products that are either minority-owned, women-owned, employee-owned, or family-owned. One of our clients, 70% of their packaged goods are companies with significant social and environmental initiatives built into their branding, and so I think taking the buying power that we have and using it to benefit the community in our sourcing is a way to include from a purveyor standpoint. And then I think the last piece is making it effortless. So everybody has had the experience who has a food allergy. Everybody has had the experience of going to a restaurant and having to really explain that these are not choices, that this is really something that people need to adhere to because there's safety involved. And so if we can make it easy by omitting dairy or utilizing a different product that removes one of the top 8 allergens, it makes it that much easier for folks to consume the food in a way that they feel comfortable and excited about it, and not like it was something special they had to ask for or inconvenience the team.
I love you. It's just hard to get chefs to, a lot of chefs are like, what? I mean, there's an event I work in January. He's like, you want me to take MSG, wheat, dairy, and something else out of my chicken and beef dishes? What do I do? And I'm like,
but you know what? Those chefs, and this is not necessarily a popular opinion because nobody likes to tell chefs what to do.
Right.
Chefs need to step their game up. They need to do a better job. I mean, this is the world that we live in, and we are at this. We've never had more options for ingredients as we do now. We've never had more options. People are constantly researching new technologies, new ways to utilize ingredients, to use byproducts of ingredients. I mean, if you're telling me that as a chef you can't figure out how to do something without this particular ingredient, you need to look at what you're doing and you need to push yourself to be more creative.
Yeah. I was just like, it blew my mind. And it makes me want to, create a whole conference for them saying, this is how you do this,
I think that that's something that people would really benefit from. I mean, I've been working with chefs on menu creation, and we will sit there and we have 136 new menu items every single week. It's a lot to put together.
Wow!
Yeah. And I'll tell you, 54% of it is plant-based. So it's vegan or vegetarian. And then people have the options of adding protein, which of course has a huge environmental impact on the positive front. But it also means that there are quite a few allergens that are not present and people can eat much more freely. And I think if chefs can learn how to do that, they will be not only will they be more creatively fulfilled, but they'll have more business in their operations.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I tell the story that you told me from your last one where you got approval to use all halal meats, and then you sat down with the gentleman who follows a kosher diet, and the company ended up subsidizing his paycheck so that he could, because they couldn't find a solution for that. And that to me is the solution, right? Mm-hmm. But listening to people, and then the other one of your former colleague, Allison, where her company, they didn't incorporate the company cafeteria in trying to improve the health of their employees, but they ended up coming back and doing that, and it helped reduce it because they promoted the healthier options.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I think that's, what you said earlier. So is this Guggenheim's push forward, or is that the company saying this is what we want?
So it's a bit of both. So So Guggenheimer's motto is nourishing inspiration, and I think the word nourishing is really important because there's a wellness undertone there. We want to be able to utilize the best ingredients and minimal preparation so that people are really getting the highest quality product. But the reality is that our clients are the ones who are driving the type of culture they want to have. We find that our best partners are the ones where we share those values together. And so if we can help promote wellness for our clients and that's a top priority for them, that's the type of ideal partnership we want to have.
What obstacles have you had to overcome in your career as a woman and just in general in the food and beverage?
Well, let me start by saying that I've been extremely lucky. I want to put that out there first. When it comes to really anybody in this industry, the obstacles that I have had pale in comparison to others. So I want to start by just putting that on the table. I think that being more on the front of the house and the business side of it is a whole other world. I mean, when you get into the kitchen, the women that have been pioneering leadership in kitchens have been have had to overcome quite a few obstacles far beyond what I have had to overcome. That being said, I think the biggest obstacles that I've been confronted with really are just, I don't know if this counts as an obstacle, but I think being an ambitious young woman in an aggressive city like New York comes with a set of obstacles. I came up in the New York City restaurant scene before the Me Too movement really came out, before it was really practices in restaurants were a little loosey-goosey, and I think that being able to support our female workers in the industry now is much easier than it was in the past. And so, that's not to say that, there was anything egregious in my own history, but I think that a lot of those obstacles have been broken down now in terms of how we can support each other and the way that we communicate with other people on the team. It's drastically improved from the past. I know that was a bit of a dodgy answer.
No, that's okay. What words of wisdom did your mother, your grandmother, your sister, your aunts give you with what you encourage you or what you do?
Well, my family likes to talk a lot, so there's a lot of words of wisdom. I think, interestingly enough, as cliche as it sounds, what I have learned from the women in my family is really more about actions than about words of wisdom. I grew up in a family of all very strong women. I have 3 aunts, my grandmother. There's an infamous story in my family about my grandmother who was working at my grandfather's medical practice, and she came up with, she went to my grandfather and said, somebody's stealing, and he said, no, there's absolutely no way anybody could steal from us, and she proceeded to steal from him for weeks on end, and then went and took the cash and said, look, I was able to steal and you had no idea. And so I think that is, that's one of my favorite stories because especially, being a woman in that time, being a working woman in that time, and kind of not being listened to and sort of dismissed and being able to say, you know what, instead of giving up, I'm going to prove this and I'm going to show this person really what's going on here. And I think it was something my grandfather never forgot. And so, we have a long line of strong women in my family that have really shown how to operate businesses. My mom's business is, of course, woman-owned. Her and my sister now own it together. And she did that while, of course, raising my sister and I and balancing work and life. And I think that those are all lessons that have been really valuable to me. Everybody in my family, men and women both, have been huge feminists, really, huge proponents of women in any industry, but particularly in the food industry, and just always providing that support, I think, has been really impactful both for me as a family member, but also to the folks that have worked in their teams as well.
That's so awesome. Your grandmother sounds awesome, fantastic.
she's a pretty awesome lady.
All right, you're a brand new aunt. Is this your first niece?
Yes.
So, what words of wisdom do you have for the ruffled jeans girl?
Her name is Maybelline.
Maybelline.
Oh my goodness. This is off topic, but I mean,
yeah.
I always expected that I would, of course, love anything that was my sister's baby, but I have been so overwhelmed with how much I love this little girl, and she has such an incredible personality already. I think, I want, especially now with everything that's going on, it's hard to know what the future is going to look like, and it's hard to know what the role of women is going to be in the world that is rapidly evolving and changing. And I think, my words of wisdom for her are going to be to really be able, they're words of wisdom that were given to me, actually, and it's something that my father has always said, and it's just that at the end of the day, you need to be able to put your head on the pillow and know that you did the right thing. And that means do the right thing for you, for the people around you, for your family, for the people that work with you and for you and above you. And I think that's the most important guiding principle, because it means that you operate with integrity and care, and that you can really go to sleep at night and rest easily knowing that you've been true to yourself and looked after those around you.
That's such great advice for anybody,
Yep. It has been a real guiding principle. We are all put in situations where we say to ourselves, do I feel good about this? Is this something that I can go to bed and think I did the right thing? And this helped me answer a lot of difficult questions.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many stories that you can think of that people didn't ask themselves that before they did that, before they did something. All right, so one more question before I ask you the last one.
Sure.
Who in the industry do you admire?
So when I looked at this question, it was really hard to choose because there are so many people that I admire. I mean, any woman chef who is leading a kitchen right now, especially in New York City, just to get to that point, I have witnessed and can imagine those obstacles. So that's one area that I think is just hugely admirable, and a shameless plug to go out and support those people by buying gift certificates and merchandise and whatever you can do for those restaurants. But I think, a couple of the folks that I've been really impressed with, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Emma's Torch in Brooklyn, so they have a restaurant, but they also work to empower refugees through culinary education. So they have a program with an apprenticeship. It's about 600 hours of culinary training, and it just gives people the opportunity to work in the restaurant industry, which, as we all know, has been a safe haven for folks of all walks of life in the past. And so I think having an organization that can help train people and give them that opportunity is really impressive. And then I think one of the other folks that I had mentioned to you in the past is Erin Wade. So Erin Wade is the founder and CEO of Homeroom, a restaurant in Oakland, and they created this incredible poster that I love that's called Not on the Menu. And it's sort of like the health department posters you're required to have up in your restaurants, but it's a poster about how to help your employees communicate if they're feeling uncomfortable in an interaction with a guest. And it's something that I think needs to become a common practice in all restaurants. And so her ability to create something that is a tool that any restaurant can use, I think, is a great contribution.
That's fantastic. And I think Sally sent that to me recently when I was coming up with this list of women.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So I have one more question before I ask you that final one. But
yeah, of course.
What do you see I mean, with food allergies and dietary restrictions and things like that, Emily's working to change, working on policy to change the food bill, because like right now it says only 100% whole grain or whole wheat is allowed, whole wheat bread is allowed in the WIC and SNAP programs. So she's trying to change it to be 100% grain. What do you see, what do you look forward to in the food and beverage industry around dietary needs? You kind of already mentioned it a little bit, but I just want to see if you have anything specific.
Sure. I mean, I look forward to the future of allergies and dietary restrictions becoming more accessible to all persons. Right now, that access is certainly limited to people of a certain class, to people who have access to that information and to going out to restaurants and to, employees who are extremely educated about the food that they're serving and the food that they're cooking. And I think living in a world where it is widely accepted that many of these restrictions are not by choice, but are really medical needs, I think is something that's really important. And I think, not to go off on a total tangent here, but I'm going to go off on it anyway, and you can feel free to edit it out. One of the things that I've become recently very interested in is accessibility in restaurants. Based on a personal experience, I experienced a snowboarding accident last year, and I broke both of my wrists.
Oh, wow.
And I learned about the world in a completely new way. And I realized, living in New York City, how inaccessible our world is, our work world, our play world. It's really remarkable. And that was just with a temporary injury that I was able to recover from pretty quickly. And so I think, along with the inclusivity around dietary restrictions and ingredients, I think we also need to look as an industry about how we can create dining experiences that are more inclusive on a completely different level for folks of various abilities as well.
Oh, you just made my day even more. Because last summer I tore my rotator cuff. So my mom had to cut my food. I mean, thankfully I had moved in with my parents, and so I was here when I needed to recover, and I'm still here. I haven't left. But, it's amazing. And we went to a friend's house to eat, and he's like, okay, well, go through the buffet. And I'm like, okay, well, and I was able to put my plate down on the kitchen counter to then spoon it with my left hand. But if you're going through a convention center buffet, there's not enough room on that table to put your plate down.
Oh, absolutely. And not just as a consumer, as a provider. I mean, luckily I am in management and had the ability to adjust some of my work so that I could continue working. But if I was still a server in a restaurant, I would be out of work. And the benefits for that, as we all know, are not strong in the restaurant industry. And I think we need to not just help our guests, but help our people as well to set up for, if God forbid there is an injury or an accident, or to create an environment that is more accessible for anybody to work in.
Exactly. And that reminds me of those coffee shops that some of the company, or, there's people, small mom and pop shops that are opening up and hiring people that have different disabilities, learning disabilities or whatever, to work there so that they are empowered. But getting through spaces, and a lot of restaurants they don't have a lot of space to roll a wheelchair through, or the doors, or how do you get into the building and things like that. So, yeah. And even visually impaired individuals or hearing impaired, how do you manage that in restaurants? And from hey, can you have a blind chef?
Right.
They cook at home.
Right.
They have to do it, so why can't we make that environment in the workplace as well? I love that. Thank you. So I'm going to let you choose between this last one. You can either answer what is your favorite food and why, or and then if you could have anyone in the world over for dinner, who would you choose? You can answer both or one. I don't care.
Oh, both of these questions are really hard. These are the hardest questions that you sent me. Let's see. So my favorite food and why is obviously very hard to pick. My favorite food, I have to say, is tacos, because there's so many different iterations. You can have fusion with other cuisines. You can have traditional. Obviously, in New York, we have a very particular type of taco, but we don't have a lot of access to really excellent, authentic tacos the way they do in California. So that's something that I miss a lot of. But the thing that I love most about tacos is that it's the most fun to eat. You can get together with all of your friends and put all of the different parts out, and everybody can build what they like. And I think I could probably, if I had to sustain myself on one food for the rest of my life, it would have to be tacos.
You're the second person that has answered that with tacos.
I mean, they're the best.
They really are, and you can do different kinds of sides and shells, and yes.
And you can use all different parts of animals and vegetables to make fillings. You could use what people call scrap pieces of things to make taco fillings and toppings. I mean, it's also a very economical food.
Yes. Hey, that's a really good thing for food waste. What do you do with the potato peels? You turn them into tacos. Yeah. All right, so do you want to answer the other one or no?
Well, I don't know if my other answer is good or not.
Well, any answer is good.
Okay, so the answer is, and I texted my two girlfriends this earlier and they teased me, but I'm going with it because, like I said, I have to be my authentic self. Yeah. If I could have anybody in the world over for dinner, I would choose RuPaul.
Okay, tell me why. I love that.
So I just, a bit of a controversial figure, but he is just a fascinating individual to me, and I think that he's somebody who just lives his truth and is a really interesting person and has helped so many people really be able to feel comfortable in their own skin, be true to who they are, be accepting of others, and he's really taken gay culture and brought it into the mainstream in a way that very few other people have done. And if you look at so many of the memes and phrases and popular culture references that happen in mainstream society now, many of them trace back to him and to gay culture in some way. And I just think that his ability to power through the adversity and still be going strong as a social leader in the world today is remarkable.
I love that. That is so cool.
And also, I would have to come up with a great outfit.
You totally would have to come up with a great outfit because he comes up with these phenomenal ones.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I as I said before, I love you.
Well, thank you. I'm so honored that you would even think of me and ask me to share my thoughts on any of this.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.